My name is Shawana May, and between the ages of 6 and 11, I was molested by my aunt and uncle. My parents were pastor and first lady, and I have various childhood traumas that affected me. My mother did not want to have me. My father had to beg my mother to get pregnant because he wanted a boy to name after John F. Kennedy. My mom not wanting me from the beginning was very relevant in my relationship with her as a child. When I was 2.5, my father discovered that I had a hole in my heart that had not closed. My father discovered it by hugging me. One day when he came home from work, I would greet him and sit on his lap and give him a hug. And he was hugging me, and he called my mom over and said, her heart doesn't sound normal. It wasn't a regular beating. It was like a faucet turned on, like a swishing sound. And so that was something that really traumatized me as a child. I was in the hospital for 6 months of my young life, from the age of 2.5 to 3. I still have vivid memories of that time that I remember vividly. And when going through therapy, therapists are generally pretty shocked that I have those memories and that I can recall things that happened at such an early age. I remember when my parents actually took me for the very first time for surgery. They took me to the hospital when they were going to leave me there. How afraid I was. I remember kicking and screaming when they handed me to the nurse and scratching the nurse. I later also found out that my parents tried to get the American Heart Association to help pay for my surgery. But because they were African American back then, there was no help for them to pay for the surgery. So they had to mortgage the house that I grew up in order to pay for my surgery. So I feel as if I'm meant to be here. This trauma has happened to me for a reason. I remember being in recovery, being in a tent, in a crib where my parents would have to come, put their hands inside plastic gloves to touch me inside the tent. There were other children in the recovery room that I was in for months. And one of the little boys in the room that I was in, who had the same surgery, passed away during that time. I remember being on the table as a child during surgery and actually them having to bring me back to life with the things that shock your heart. I literally have remembered these things all my life and have shared this with my family. From the age of 6 to 11, I was molested by an aunt and uncle who were the deacon and the church secretary at my father's church. I have 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers. I kind of grew up as an only child because they were a lot older than me. My 2 sisters, who were the oldest, were 14 and 15 years older than me. They had been molested by the same uncle, and they told, and nothing happened. My sisters were only abused by the uncle. And one of my sisters literally later committed suicide because of the trauma from being molested. She committed suicide at the age of 47. So back then, it was not common for molestation to be something that was exploited once it was exposed, especially within the church. It wasn't something that was talked about. And so when my sisters told, literally nothing happened. And so the dynamics, from what I am told by my older sisters, is that my mother became very angry with her brother. It was her brother. But my father did not make him step down from being a deacon in the church, and nothing happened. I do remember being molested by my aunt and my uncle repeatedly. I was fondled, I was touched, molested, and there was no way that I could even speak about all this trauma maybe 7-10 years ago, because it was so overwhelming. I've gone through and sought so much therapy throughout my lifetime that I've been able to clearly speak and share with other people on how trauma affects not just the individual, but the family. It affected how I raised my children. So that's what caused me to seek therapy, was because my depression, my anxiety, I was diagnosed later with bipolar, complex PTSD. These are things that, I was not aware had a name for the way that I reacted to life. And so when I was diagnosed, it really allowed me the opportunity to understand that there was something deeper that I needed to learn about myself and how I functioned within my inner being so that I could express myself the way that I knew I wanted to express myself and not the way that my trauma caused me to express myself. My uncle ended up passing away at a very early age from multiple sclerosis. I know for a fact that he molested his other family members because there was a routine where he would call one of us into the room, and when he was done with one person, he would tell us to go tell the other child to come into the room. No one noticed because we didn't talk about it. My relationship with my siblings is, and still is today, pretty distant. We love each other. We know that we're family. I would, give my all to them, but we don't communicate. And that's just pretty much how it has always been with me. And a part of that is the age difference. I'm so much younger than the other siblings. I'm the only one that's not married. They're all religious. So when you're not married, you just kind of don't fit in. And so I've always kind of been the black sheep. Even as a child, I was pretty spoiled by my parents. So personally, I feel there's maybe some jealousy there as well. When my sister passed away, she was 47 years old. She lived in Utah. She passed away and didn't have any family there. She had 2 children who were underage. When she passed away, she was on life support for about 4 days. And my mom and my siblings all went to Utah to the hospital to see my sister. They were only giving her a few days to live. And I was a single mom with 5 kids. They decided that I wasn't going to go with them. So they went and they stayed for a day and a half, and they all came back. And then they decided they were going to pay for me to fly to Utah to the hospital to pull the plug on my sister. As a kid, I'm very creative. I cried a lot. I had a make-believe friend named Fifi. I would hide in the closet and talk to Fifi a lot. Also, even at a young age with my peers in my neighborhood, we would play doctor and do things that children exploring sexually, even as a child. There were some children in the neighborhood who wouldn't participate in those behaviors, and later come to find out that those were the children who had never been touched by their uncle. Yeah, my imaginary friend Fifi, hiding in the closet all day and listening and hearing my family members, talk about me, say certain things about me that they wouldn't say in my face, and then me not being able to address them, or if I did, doing it crying and they just dismiss me and, oh, she's crazy, that kind of thing. Just, very, very isolated emotionally. Never experienced the kind of love and protection that I think a sister would get from brothers either. Neither of my brothers were protective of me. I remember one of my brothers, my dad punched him. Never seen my dad punch. He was such a gentle spirit. Never gave us a whipping or anything. My mother was the one that dished out punishment. But my father literally punched my brother one time for calling me a whore. My brothers never protected me. So my aunt with me, when I would be called into the room, and I say we because I had cousins in the house who would be called in one after another. So when it was my turn to be called into the room, my aunt would be there, and she would pretty much restrain me and watch and make, these sounds, sexual sounds, while my uncle was performing these lewd acts on my body. Maybe me as a 6-year-old child having an orgasm. Okay, this is just so disgusting. So that would be the aunt's role. I consider myself very close to my cousins. Spent a lot of time, especially at this particular house. I had other cousins that lived nearby that I didn't spend as much time at. I have a set of cousins on my father's side. So the molestation took place on cousins from my mother's side. I did consider myself close to my cousins growing up, but closer to the cousins on my father's side. They were way more protective of me. My dad passed away when I was like 29, so that was before I started working through my trauma. When he was passing away, I managed to ask my father why he never taught me that fornication was a sin, because in the Bible it's a sin. And he said, I thought you knew better. So the only rationality that I could come to when hearing that from him was the fact that he knew that possibly my virginity had been taken before I ever had an opportunity to have sex outside of marriage or whatever. So that is the only rational explanation that I came up with from myself to understand his reasoning from his perspective. My best friend lived across the street from my aunt and uncle, and I experienced seeing him being molested in his house by his uncle who lived there with him. So when I would visit my aunt and uncle, I would go across the street to play with him. And there would be times when his uncle would call him into the bedroom when we were playing for no apparent reason. And I'd be out, playing in the den or the living room or the kitchen or wherever we were for, 10, 15 minutes. Come to find out, at one point, the uncle had me come into the room as well. He was molesting my friend, who was a young man at the time. And come to find out later on, my friend actually died from AIDS. That was quite devastating also. The same friend, who's my best friend, set me up to be raped. So I was attempted gang raped. My friend had 5 of his guy friends come to this house after the parents left, and they invited me in the house. And they kept me in the house in a bedroom for the whole time. I literally think it was about 8 hours. And they attempted to rape me, and I fought them off for that whole time. And they did not succeed in raping me. But what I do remember is when the parents came home and pulled into the garage of the house, they freaked out. I escaped and ran out through the front door before the parents could get into the house. These are things I never told that these things happened, because I was already preconditioned to not tell. I really feel like, and I don't know if it's the way that I was raised in the church, but I really feel like when you violate a child, it does something to them spiritually as well, not just emotionally and physically. And so some of the things that have happened to me, it's almost as if this wicked energy is just like tried to magnetize itself to me because of the trauma, the violations that I've experienced. And I'm so grateful that I have, dodged a lot of those things. There was a point where there was a young man who was talking to a friend of mine, and he showed some interest in me. And he and I met in a different city. And come to find out, I couldn't find out where he lived. And so I stopped to go into, this is when phone booths were inside stores. And I went into a liquor store to get on the phone to call this person to let them know that I'm in your neighborhood, but I can't find your house. And as I was leaving to go get back into my car, I was approached by, which I did not know at the time, a gentleman who was a pimp. And this was a very busy city. I'm from a small town, and I lived in the rural area, so it was very country, no sidewalks, we had horses, and so on and so forth. So kind of naive in a sense as well, but also because of my trauma and being led by the sexual, desires and energy. This person started talking to me, and I let this person get in my car. I was driving, right? But I let them get in my car to take them somewhere to, I don't even remember what. But what I do remember is ended up being in the back seat of my car with this person, and he was going to burn me in my genital areas with a cigarette. And don't ask me how I got out of that situation, but I ended up crying and pleading with him to please, like, don't do this to me. And I ended up tricking him to get out of my car to come around so he could drive. And before he could get in on the passenger side, I locked the door and I drove off. I also remember I have a best friend that I've been friends with forever. She and I are still friends to this day. We've been friends since like the summer of the 4th grade. We used to go party together when we were teenagers. And she said, I never could understand why you were so promiscuous. These were just energy and disgusting behaviors that this trauma embedded in me as a young adult. I was a cheerleader from junior high and high school. And in the summer of the 8th grade going to the 9th grade, we had cheer camp that summer. And I was driving. I was very spoiled. I was driving before I had my license. I was driving to cheer practice. And all of a sudden, this really handsome white guy pulls up to me at a stoplight and he starts flirting with me. He's asking me to pull over. I decided to pull over, and the guy pulls next to me, and so his passenger seat is next to my driver's seat. And he's persuading me to get out of my car and come get in his car. So I get out, and a couple people come out of the bar and see me, and I'm standing at the window of his passenger seat, and my like I said, my door is right next to him. And I'm standing there talking to him, and he's asking me to come to an event in the hills later with him. He's going to a barbecue. I couldn't go because I was late for cheerleading practice, but I asked him for his phone number. He gave me his phone number. He also proceeded to pull his penis out and fondle himself. I guess he thought I was going to tempt me to get him more, but cheerleading practice, fortunately, was more important to me. Years later, I'm married. I go to the mailbox and I pull out envelope from the mailbox, and it's Time Life magazine mail. And it is talking about documentaries that the magazine is doing on serial killers. And I turn it over to open it, and there's a set of eyes on the envelope, the shape of the envelope. And when I saw those eyes, my heart dropped to my stomach. And I later found out that that person was Ted Bundy. I felt a lot of guilt from that, because I even shared this in therapy. Like, why did these other people not get away and I got away? I had another girlfriend. We were partied all the time. I'm sure I drove my mother crazy. We partied all the time. Where we lived, there was an academy called, there was an academy, Marine base. There was an academy there. She and I would go to the club, to the bar, way underage, going to bars with fake ID, and ended up on a ship having sex with guys. And one of the guys on the ship happened to know my brother. So my brother comes to me a couple of months later and says, basically telling me that this person saw me on the ship. And that was just really weird. But what was more weird was the fact that the way that my brother came to me, it was more like a gossip thing instead of how can I help you kind of thing. Like, you might want to be careful kind of thing. Like, just so confusing for me. Like, does anybody have any moral compass to like really help me guide through this young adult trying eras? My mother was very creative. My mother was also very abusive. And so my relationship with her was very odd. I admired her. I wanted to learn from her. I learned to sew. I'm an excellent seamstress. She was just very creative when she was doing things for her business to present to people in her downline. So the inner child in me was so, and it still is, so connected to my mother's creativity and her nurturing that is what I drew from in my healing process. When I was a teenager, I had my first child out of wedlock. That was, a no-no, being a preacher's daughter. And so my parents wanted me to give my child up for adoption, and I refused to do so. They picked a couple in the church. They, kept trying to persuade me to give him up. This couple was, an upstanding couple, but I would not do it. I just have this sense of being fortified within my spirit because of the trauma and not having anybody there except for Fifi. Yoga. Oh my God, yoga. So that's where this ties in with my mother as well. After my first divorce, I sought therapy. Had a magnificent therapist. He and I are still friends to this day. He helped counsel my children. He ended up moving away. I ended up getting remarried and going through a lot more trauma in my second relationship. My neighbors came to me in this relationship and asked me if I thought I might be bipolar, which was kind of strange, because her sister was bipolar, and she said, you have some attributes that are kind of similar. You might want to go, get checked out. There was still a lot of stuff that I had not dealt with and didn't realize it. And so I did end up going to get therapy. And over the years, this was a journey. This was really the beginning of a journey that I attribute to the fact that I'm able to speak so openly and freely and have a smile on my face and share with other people. Eventually, after many, many therapists, many, many years, I'm going to say maybe about 15 years, maybe, finally experiencing yoga. And I took a yoga class as a prerequisite for my sociology degree, and it changed my life. One of the other things that I experienced because of my trauma is after my second divorce, I went into the adult entertainment business. And that was something that I would not have chosen to do as a preacher's daughter. That was not how my mother was a virgin. My dad was the only person she was ever married to. It just was not part of how I was brought up. And so this was a choice that I made, and I discovered from therapy that I made this particular choice because of my trauma. I had to talk myself into doing the work that I did, but I had to support my children. I had a mortgage and I had 5 kids. I became a millionaire on paper. As a single mom with 5 kids. I homeschooled my kids, but that particular experience went against my conscience so much. And I share this with people who are Christians when I talk to them one-on-one because of the moral aspects and how prostitution or adult industry is looked at. And it was such a humbling experience for me. I'm an intuitive life coach. I've taken the education that I received from my getting my yoga practitioner, social emotional learning facilitator certification. Actually, my Facebook family paid for me to go through that training during COVID. I was doing videos for my audience on Facebook. I have quite a few followers on Facebook. And so during COVID, I was doing yoga, and one of my followers suggested that I get certified as a practitioner because I had always been telling the story about how yoga saved my life. And I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford the tuition. And I did a campaign on my Facebook page and they donated the money for me to get certified. So I use that to help in the community now. I've always kind of been involved in the community, but now my focus is really on helping people navigate through their own personal trauma.